The rain pounded relentlessly against the windows of Jack Carter's weathered yellow taxi. Each drop a reminder of the bleak December night. Manhattan's streets, usually alive with energy, now seemed eerily subdued, cloaked in mist and shadow. Neon signs flickered like dying embers, casting fractured reflections on rain-slicked pavement. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles whitening as he swerved to avoid yet another reckless driver darting through the storm. Jack was used to working the graveyard shift, ferrying all manner of passengers, businesspeople too drunk to stand, lovers clinging to fleeting moments of intimacy, and sometimes, those who simply needed a quiet escape. Tonight, though, something felt off, like the city itself was holding its breath. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 11:43 p.m. Almost time to call it a night. But then he saw her. Standing by the side of the road near a broken-down sedan was a woman. Drenched to the bone, her hands trembled as she waved frantically, her silhouette barely visible against the curtain of rain. Jack pulled over, his curiosity piqued by her sheer desperation. As the wipers cleared his view, he noticed her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant, at least, and the unmistakable fear etched across her pale face. She stumbled toward the cab, clutching her stomach. Jack rolled down the window, the icy wind biting at his skin. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I need help. My car, it's dead. And they're coming." Jack's brow furrowed. "Who's coming? Are you hurt?" Her head snapped around, scanning the empty street. Her soaked hair clung to her face, masking her expression. "Please, just drive," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Something about her tone, half pleading, half commanding, sent a shiver down Jack's spine. Against his better judgment, he unlocked the door. "Get in." Emily slid into the backseat, her hands gripping her stomach as if protecting her unborn child from the world outside. Jack hit the gas, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Her eyes darted nervously, constantly checking the road behind them. "What's going on?" Jack asked, his voice steady but curious. "You're not just running from a broken car, are you?" She hesitated, biting her lip as if weighing whether to trust him. Before she could answer, Jack caught sight of a sleek black SUV turning onto the street, its headlights cutting through the gloom like a predator's gaze. It was moving too deliberately, matching their pace. "Friends of yours?" Jack asked, nodding toward the mirror. Emily froze. "No, please, just keep driving." Jack's instincts screamed at him to drop her off and disappear. But something about her vulnerability kept him from turning her away. He made a sharp left onto a side street, hoping to lose the SUV. The tires skidded on the wet asphalt, and he cursed under his breath. "Who are they?" he pressed, his voice low but firm. "They work for Owen Tatum," she admitted finally, her voice breaking. I used to work for him. He's dangerous, and now they're after me." Jack didn't need more details to understand the gravity of the situation. The SUV was still following, its headlights a menacing presence in the mirror. He tightened his grip on the wheel, his mind racing. "Hold on," he muttered, slamming his foot on the gas. The taxi weaved through the narrow streets of Manhattan, dodging traffic and narrowly avoiding collisions. Jack's years of experience as a driver were the only thing keeping them ahead of their pursuers. Emily clutched the seat, her breathing ragged. "Why would Tatum send them after you?" Jack demanded, his voice rising with the tension. Emily hesitated again, then blurted out, "I know things that could ruin him. I saw too much when I worked for him. And now he thinks I'll talk." The pieces started to fall into place. But Jack didn't have time to ask more questions. The SUV rammed into the back of the taxi, sending it skidding. Jack fought to regain control, his heart pounding. "Damn it," he growled. "Hold on back there." He swerved into an alley, the tight space forcing the SUV to slow down. But the respite was brief. As they emerged onto another street, the SUV was right behind them again. Finally, Jack spotted an entrance to a parking garage. Without warning, he turned sharply into it, the cab screeching as it slid to a stop behind a row of parked cars. He killed the engine, motioning for Emily to stay silent. The SUV roared past, its tires splashing water onto the sidewalk. Jack exhaled, his hands trembling slightly. He turned to face Emily, who looked equally shaken. "All right," he said, his voice calmer now. "If I'm risking my neck for you, I need to know the truth. What's really going on?" Emily hesitated, her hands trembling as she wiped the rain from her face. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I was Tatum's assistant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I have proof of everything he's done: money laundering, smuggling, bribes. I thought I could run. But I was wrong." Jack stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Before he could respond, the sound of an engine echoed in the garage. The black SUV was back. The low growl of the SUV's engine echoed ominously through the parking garage. Jack's pulse quickened as he turned off the taxi's lights, plunging them into darkness. Beside him, Emily froze, clutching her swollen belly as if willing her baby to stay silent. "They're not going to give up," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain outside. Jack peeked through the rearview mirror, spotting the SUV creeping past the entrance. Its headlights cut through the shadows, sweeping across rows of parked cars. "Stay down," Jack hissed. He shifted his seat backward and slowly reached for the door handle. "What are you doing?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Buying us some time." Jack's jaw tightened. "If I don't come back, you run. Don't look back." Emily grabbed his arm, desperation flashing in her eyes. "No, you can't." Before she could finish, Jack slipped out of the car and into the shadows, his movements quick but careful. Crouching low, Jack navigated through the labyrinth of parked vehicles, his boots splashing quietly in puddles on the garage floor. The SUV idled near the taxi, its engine rumbling like a predator ready to pounce. Jack could see the silhouettes of two men inside, Victor and Paul. Victor, the larger of the two, stepped out first. He was bald with a scar running from his left temple to his jawline, a testament to a violent past. Paul, wiry and sharp-eyed, followed, scanning the garage like a hawk. Both were armed, their weapons glinting under the flickering fluorescent lights. "Find her," Victor growled. His voice was low, cold, and full of menace. She couldn't have gotten far. As the men split up, Jack seized the moment. He grabbed a loose tire iron from the floor and silently stalked Paul, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. When Paul stepped too close to Jack's hiding spot, Jack struck, landing a solid blow to the man's knee. Paul collapsed with a muffled cry, his gun clattering to the ground. Before Jack could retrieve the weapon, Victor turned, his eyes narrowing at the sound. "Paul?" he called out, his voice echoing. Jack ducked behind a car, his mind racing. He needed to act fast before Victor discovered Emily. Victor advanced cautiously, his weapon raised. Jack could feel the tension in the air, each second stretching into an eternity. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Emily. She was peeking out from the backseat of the taxi, her face pale but determined. Jack motioned for her to stay put, but Emily shook her head. She held up the USB drive, a tiny object that held the power to dismantle an empire. Jack's stomach sank. If Victor saw her, all was lost. Summoning his courage, Jack grabbed Paul's dropped gun and aimed it at the ceiling. He fired a single shot, the deafening echo sending Victor into a frenzy. "There!" Victor shouted, sprinting toward the sound. Emily seized the distraction. She slipped out of the taxi and darted toward a side exit, her movements surprisingly quick despite her condition. Jack waited until Victor was out of sight before following her. "Over here," Emily whispered, holding the door open for him. Jack bolted through the exit just as Victor's angry voice echoed behind them. They emerged into a dark alley, the rain still pouring in sheets. Jack's taxi was compromised, and the streets were too exposed. "Where to now?" Emily asked, her voice breaking with exhaustion. Jack scanned the alley, his eyes landing on a delivery truck parked nearby. "We need a new ride." Jack hotwired the truck with surprising ease, his years as a cabbie having taught him more than just driving. Emily climbed into the passenger seat, clutching the USB drive as if it were a lifeline. "You've done this before," she said, her tone somewhere between awe and suspicion. Jack smirked, though there was no humor in it. "You pick up a few tricks when you've been around as long as I have." As the truck roared to life, they sped away from the alley. Jack took a convoluted route, weaving through side streets and doubling back to throw off any potential tail. Emily remained silent, her eyes darting to every passing car. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the city, where the streets were quieter. Jack pulled into a secluded gas station and cut the engine. "We're clear for now," he said, leaning back in his seat. But they'll be looking for us. Emily nodded, her hands trembling as she held the USB. This has everything, she said. Bank accounts, transaction records, even recordings of Tatum's deals. If I can get this to the FBI, they'll take him down. Jack raised an eyebrow. And what's stopping you? Emily's eyes filled with tears. I tried once. I went to the police. But someone tipped Tatum off. That's why they're after me now. I can't trust anyone. Jack sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. You trusted me. She met his gaze, her expression softening. You didn't have to stop for me. But you did. That means something. As they refueled and gathered their wits, Jack began formulating a plan. We'll need a safe place to lay low, he said. I know someone, Detective Ramirez. She's tough but fair. If anyone can help, it's her. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but we have to move fast. Tatum won't stop until I'm dead. And if he finds out you're helping me. Jack cut her off. We'll deal with that when the time comes. With the truck ready and their resolve steeled, they drove into the night, heading toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the storm began to clear. But the darkness of their situation loomed larger than ever. The rain had finally let up by the time Jack and Emily reached a small motel on the outskirts of the Bronx. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where anonymity was both the appeal and the expectation. Jack parked the delivery truck behind the building, out of view of the main road, and led Emily inside. The clerk at the front desk, a disheveled man with a cigarette hanging from his lips, barely glanced at them as Jack paid in cash. They were given a key to a room at the far end of the building. Once inside, Emily collapsed onto the bed, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. Jack locked the door and checked the windows, his nerves still on edge. We'll stay here for the night, he said. Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move. Emily nodded, her hands still clutching the USB drive. She placed it on the nightstand, as though the mere act of letting it go would make it disappear. Do you think we'll make it out of this? She asked softly. Jack hesitated. I don't know, but I've got a feeling you're tougher than you look. As the hours dragged on, the silence in the room grew heavier. Jack sat by the window, watching for any signs of pursuit, while Emily lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Finally, she broke the silence. I didn't mean to get involved, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack turned toward her. Involved in what? Tatum's empire. She propped herself up on her elbows, her expression distant. When I started working for him, I thought it was just another job. I was desperate. My family needed money. And he paid well, too well. Jack crossed his arms. And then? Emily sighed. I didn't ask questions at first. But over time, I started noticing things, unmarked packages, late-night meetings, payments that didn't make sense. And then, one day, I accidentally overheard a conversation. Tatum was talking about shipments, gold smuggled in from overseas, laundered money flowing through shell companies. He bragged about how untouchable he was. Her voice trembled as she continued. I wanted to leave, but by then, it was too late. I'd seen too much. He kept me close, pretending to trust me, but I knew I was just another pawn. Jack frowned. And the USB? Emily glanced at the small device on the nightstand. I started collecting evidence in secret. Bank records, transaction logs, voice memos. I thought if I could gather enough, I could take him down. But when I tried to go to the authorities, someone tipped him off. That's when the threats started. Jack's jaw tightened. And now he's sent his goons after you. Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. If they catch me, I don't think they'll let me live. The next morning, Jack made a call to Detective Lisa Ramirez, an old acquaintance from his days as a cab driver. Lisa had a reputation for being relentless but fair, a rare quality in a city riddled with corruption. Ramirez, Jack said when she picked up. I need your help. It's urgent. Lisa's voice was skeptical. Carter? It's been a while. What kind of trouble are you in? Not me, Jack replied. A woman. She's got evidence on Owen Tatum. There was a long pause. Tatum? You're playing a dangerous game. Carter. I know, but she's got proof, real proof. She's in danger. Lisa, can I count on you? Another pause. Then, bring her to me. And Jack? Be careful. If Tatum gets wind of this, you're both dead. Jack hung up and turned to Emily. We've got a meeting with someone who can help. But we need to be ready for anything. They arranged to meet Lisa in a secluded park later that afternoon. Jack drove cautiously, taking back roads and making frequent detours to ensure they weren't being followed. Emily clutched the USB drive, her knuckles white. When they arrived, Lisa was waiting near a bench, her sharp eyes scanning the area. She was dressed in plain clothes, but her badge and gun were visible under her jacket. "Carter," she said, nodding at Jack before turning her attention to Emily. "You must be the one causing all this trouble." Emily smiled weakly. "You could say that." Lisa motioned for them to sit. "Let's see what you've got." Emily handed her the USB drive. Lisa plugged it into a laptop, her expression growing darker as she scrolled through the files. "This is enough to bury him," she muttered, "but it won't be easy. Tatum's got connections, judges, cops, even federal agents. If we're going to take him down, we'll need to move fast." Before they could discuss further, Jack noticed a black sedan pulling into the park. His heart sank. "We've got company." Victor and Paul stepped out of the car, their weapons drawn. Jack's mind raced. "Lisa, get her out of here," he said. "I'll hold them off." Lisa hesitated but nodded. She grabbed Emily's arm and led her toward the trees. Jack stood his ground, gripping a discarded metal pipe he'd spotted nearby. "Carter," Victor sneered as he approached. "You should have stayed out of this." Jack smirked, his heart pounding. "Yeah, well, I've never been good at following advice." The confrontation erupted into chaos, with Jack using every ounce of strength and cunning to hold off the attackers. Meanwhile, Lisa and Emily disappeared into the woods, the USB drive clutched tightly in Emily's hand. Despite the danger, Jack managed to fend off Victor and Paul long enough for Lisa and Emily to escape. As he stumbled back to the motel later that night, bruised and battered, he found Lisa waiting for him. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, her tone equal parts relief and exasperation. Jack shrugged. "What else is new?" Lisa handed him a piece of paper. "We've got a safe house lined up. The FBI is getting involved now. But you need to be careful. Jack, Tatum won't stop until you're both dead." Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we'd better make sure we hit him first." The safe house was a modest two-bedroom cabin on the outskirts of a small town in upstate New York. The forest surrounding it offered a sense of isolation, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that danger was lurking behind every tree. He parked the truck a mile down the road, covering their tracks as best as he could. Lisa, ever the pragmatist, had already secured the cabin. "It's not Fort Knox, but it'll do," she said, locking the door behind them. Emily settled into the small living room, clutching her stomach. Her exhaustion was evident, but her determination burned brighter. Jack found himself admiring her resolve, even as he questioned his own. He stepped into the kitchen with Lisa, who leaned against the counter, her expression grim. "This isn't going to hold them off forever," Lisa said, keeping her voice low. "Tatum's people will find us. It's just a matter of time." Jack nodded. "What's the play?" Lisa handed him a burner phone. "I've made contact with an FBI agent, Marcus Kane. He's willing to meet, but we need more leverage. Tatum's reach is deep, and Kane won't stick his neck out unless he's sure we can bring the whole operation down." Jack frowned. "More leverage? We've got the USB." Lisa shook her head. "It's good, but it's not enough. We need a witness, someone on the inside." Jack glanced toward Emily, who had drifted off to sleep on the couch. "She's the closest thing we've got." Lisa's voice softened. "And that makes her the biggest target." Later that night, as the others rested, Jack couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the black SUV, the relentless pursuit, and Emily's haunting story. He stepped outside for some air, the chill biting through his jacket. The sound of rustling leaves snapped him to attention. He turned sharply, his hand instinctively gripping the pipe he'd taken from the truck. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek. "Relax, Carter," the man said, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to fight." Jack's grip on the pipe tightened. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Benny," the man replied. "Used to work for Tatum." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And now?" "Now, I'm a dead man walking," Benny said with a bitter laugh. "But I've got something that might interest you." Benny pulled a folder from his jacket and handed it to Jack. Inside were documents, signed contracts, offshore account details, and photographs of Tatum meeting with high-ranking officials. "This is the kind of leverage you need," Benny said, "but it comes with a price." Jack studied the papers, his skepticism warring with curiosity. "What's the catch?" "I want protection." Benny said. You get me to Kane, and I'll testify. Otherwise, Tatum's men will find me. And I'll end up in a ditch. Jack hesitated. Why should I trust you? Benny shrugged. Because I've got nothing left to lose. The next morning, Jack introduced Benny to Lisa and Emily. Tensions ran high as Benny recounted his story, each detail painting a clearer picture of Tatum's sprawling empire. Emily was the first to speak. If you were on the inside, why turn now? Benny hesitated, his gaze falling to the floor. I thought I was untouchable. But then Tatum started tying up loose ends. People who'd been with him for years, gone. I figured it was only a matter of time before he came for me. Lisa studied him carefully. We'll take you to Kane. But if you're lying, I'm not. Benny said firmly. I want out as much as you do. With the decision made, they prepared to leave the safe house. Jack and Lisa scouted the route to the meeting point, while Emily gathered the evidence and ensured the USB was secure. As they packed, Emily pulled Jack aside. Do you trust him? She asked, her voice laced with doubt. Jack hesitated. No, but I don't trust a lot of people. Sometimes you have to gamble. Emily nodded, her expression resolute. Just don't lose. They arranged to meet Agent Kane at an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, a location chosen for its isolation. As they arrived, Jack's instincts flared. Something felt off. The stillness was too complete. The silence too loud. Lisa noticed it too. Stay sharp, she warned, her hand resting on her weapon. Benny looked nervous, his eyes darting around the empty lot. This doesn't feel right. Before Jack could respond, the sound of tires screeching shattered the silence. Black SUVs surrounded the factory, their doors opening to reveal armed men. Among them was Victor, his scarred face twisted into a cruel grin. Well, Victor said, his voice dripping with mockery. Looks like the gang's all here. Jack cursed under his breath, pulling Emily behind him as Lisa drew her gun. It's a setup, he said. Victor raised his weapon. You're not walking out of here. Carter, hand over the girl, and maybe we'll let you live. Jack stepped forward, his jaw set. Over my dead body. Victor's grin widened. That can be arranged. Chaos erupted as Victor's men opened fire. Lisa returned fire, her aim deadly as she provided cover for Jack, Emily, and Benny. Jack grabbed a metal pipe from the truck, using it to fend off an attacker who had gotten too close. Emily ducked behind a pile of crates, clutching the USB drive as if it were a lifeline. Benny, panicked but determined, managed to disarm one of the assailants, grabbing a weapon for himself. Despite their efforts, the odds were overwhelming. Jack's mind raced as he calculated their chances of escape. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a service elevator on the far side of the factory. Emily, Lisa, this way, he shouted, motioning toward the elevator. They fought their way across the room, bullets ricocheting off metal beams and shattering glass. By the time they reached the elevator, Jack was bleeding from a graze on his arm, and Lisa's ammunition was running low. As the elevator doors closed, Victor's enraged voice echoed through the factory. You can't run forever. Carter, we'll find you. Jack leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. We're not running, he muttered. We're fighting back. The elevator doors opened to the top floor of the factory, revealing a makeshift exit that led to the roof. Jack, Emily, Lisa, and Benny stumbled into the open air, the city skyline a distant blur through the rain-soaked night. Is this your idea of a plan? Lisa hissed, glaring at Jack as she reloaded her pistol. Because it's looking pretty thin right now. Jack smirked despite the chaos. I'm improvising. Benny leaned against the railing, clutching his side. They'll regroup soon. We're sitting ducks up here. Jack scanned the roof and spotted an old fire escape leading down the side of the building. Not for long. Follow me. The group descended the rickety stairs, their movements careful but swift. By the time they reached the ground, the sounds of Victor's men searching above echoed ominously. Jack led them to a hidden alley where an old, abandoned van was parked. Does it run? Lisa asked skeptically. Only one way to find out, Jack replied, climbing into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered to life after several tries, and Jack drove them into the night, leaving the factory and their pursuers behind. Their destination, the FBI field office, where Marcus Kane awaited. The FBI field office was nondescript, tucked away in a quiet section of the city. Agent Marcus Kane, a tall, Imposing man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Greeted them in a secure conference room. I don't like surprises, Carter, Kane said, folding his arms as he looked over the ragged group. And this is a big one. Jack gestured to Emily and Benny. They've got the evidence to bring down Tatum. But they need your protection. Kane arched an eyebrow. Evidence? Emily slid the USB drive across the table. This has everything: transaction records, audio recordings, and names. It's enough to take Tatum down. Kane examined the drive, his expression unreadable. This is solid. But going after Tatum isn't just dangerous, it's political suicide. He's got people in high places. That's why we came to you, Lisa said, her tone sharp. You've got the resources to keep this quiet until we've got an airtight case. Kane sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, but if we're doing this, we're doing it my way. You'll be placed in protective custody until we can verify the evidence and prepare an indictment. Jack frowned. What about Tatum's men? They won't stop coming. Kane's eyes hardened. Let me worry about them. Over the next few days, the FBI team worked tirelessly to analyze the evidence and build a case against Tatum. Emily and Benny were interrogated multiple times, their testimonies scrutinized for inconsistencies. Jack and Lisa remained on edge. Knowing Tatum's reach extended far beyond his henchmen, the case uncovered a web of corruption that stretched across state lines, involving politicians, corporate executives, and law enforcement officials. Each revelation added another layer of danger and urgency. Tensions ran high during one interrogation session when Benny hesitated to name a key accomplice. If I name him, I'm a dead man, he said, his voice shaking. Emily leaned forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. You're already a target, Benny, but if we don't bring them all down, none of us will ever be safe. Benny sighed, defeated. Fine, his name is Senator Armitage. The room fell silent. Kane's expression darkened. This just got a lot more complicated. As the case progressed, it became clear that Tatum was aware of their efforts. FBI surveillance teams reported increased activity around Tatum's known associates. And several key witnesses went missing under suspicious circumstances. One night, Jack and Emily were awakened by the sound of glass shattering. Intruders had breached their safe house. Jack grabbed a lamp, his heart pounding, and motioned for Emily to hide in the closet. The attackers were swift and coordinated. But so was Lisa. She took down one of them with a precise shot while Jack managed to subdue another with a well-placed swing of his makeshift weapon. The third fled, leaving behind a chilling message scrawled on a piece of paper. You're next. This isn't just a warning, Lisa said, examining the note. It's a promise. Despite the escalating threats, Kane moved forward with the indictment against Tatum. A press conference was held to announce the charges, naming him as the ringleader of an international smuggling and money laundering operation. The announcement sent shockwaves through the city. Protesters gathered outside Tatum's properties, while his lawyers launched a smear campaign against Emily and Benny, painting them as disgruntled former employees out for revenge. Emily struggled to stay strong as the media frenzy intensified. They're twisting everything, she said, tears welling in her eyes. What if no one believes us? Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. The truth will come out. You just have to hold on. Tatum's response was swift and brutal. Using his wealth and influence, he secured bail and began targeting the case's foundation. Witnesses were intimidated, evidence mysteriously disappeared, and rumors of corruption within the FBI began to surface. Kane, visibly stressed, called a meeting with his team. We're losing ground, he admitted. If we don't secure a key witness soon, this case will collapse. Lisa spoke up. What about Victor? He's been loyal to Tatum, but he's also ruthless. If we can turn him, it's a long shot, Kane said, but at this point, it's all we've got. With FBI resources stretched thin, Jack and Lisa devised a plan to approach Victor. They tracked him to a nightclub owned by Tatum, where he was celebrating the boss's temporary victory. Jack, ever the gambler, confronted Victor directly. You think Tatum's going to protect you? He said, his voice low and menacing. You're just another pawn to him. But you help us, and I guarantee you walk away alive. Victor sneered. You've got guts, Carter, but if I talk, I'm as good as dead. Jack leaned closer. If you don't, you already are. The tension crackled like static. Finally, Victor sighed. All right, but you'd better deliver on that promise. Victor's testimony provided the missing link in the case against Tatum. His insider knowledge exposed the full extent of the criminal empire, including its ties to prominent figures. Cain wasted no time, issuing additional indictments and expanding the case into a national investigation. The tide was finally turning. But the danger was far from over. As Jack and Emily watched the evening news, which detailed the FBI's progress, Jack turned to her and smiled. "We're getting closer." Emily nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "But we're not there yet." The case against Owen Tatum was gaining traction. But the criminal kingpin wasn't going down without a fight. His legal team, led by the infamous defense attorney Richard Whitman, began dismantling the prosecution's narrative piece by piece. Whitman's theatrics and Silvertongue dominated the media, painting Emily and Benny as unreliable witnesses with ulterior motives. The smear campaign took its toll on Emily. News outlets parroted accusations that she was a disgruntled former employee trying to destroy Tatum out of spite. As her face appeared on every screen, Emily found herself questioning whether the public would ever see the truth. Jack, however, refused to let her falter. "They're throwing everything at you because they're scared," he said one night as they watched yet another biased news segment. "If you weren't a threat, they wouldn't bother." Emily nodded, her jaw set. "Then we need to hit them harder." Agent Cain's efforts were bolstered by Victor's testimony. But it came at a cost. The former enforcer demanded witness protection for himself and his family. And even then, his cooperation was hesitant at best. During one tense interrogation, Cain pressed Victor for details about Tatum's offshore accounts. "We need names, Victor. Executives, account holders, anyone who can corroborate the paper trail." Victor leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "You want names? How about Senator Armitage, or Judge Matthews? You think those guys are going to roll over and confess?" Cain's expression darkened. "If you're lying, I'm not," Victor interrupted. "But good luck getting them to talk. Tatum's got dirt on everyone. And they know it." The revelation sent shockwaves through Cain's team. The network of corruption was deeper than they'd anticipated. And the stakes had never been higher. Tensions within the group began to rise as the pressure mounted. Emily and Benny clashed over the risks they were taking, with Benny accusing her of dragging him into a no-win situation. "You think I wanted this?" Emily snapped. "I'm trying to fix what Tatum destroyed." "And what about me?" Benny shot back. "I'm the one putting my neck on the line for your crusade." Jack stepped in before the argument could escalate further. "Enough. We're all in this together. Like it or not, if we start fighting each other, Tatum's already won." The confrontation left the group shaken but united in their resolve. They knew they couldn't afford to falter, not with everything on the line. Cain's team finally caught a break when an anonymous whistleblower came forward, providing critical documents that tied Tatum's operations to a series of mysterious shell companies. The evidence was damning: emails, invoices, and wire transfers that painted a clear picture of money laundering on an unprecedented scale. Emily's heart raced as she reviewed the files with Cain. "This is it," she said. "This proves everything." Cain nodded. "It's strong, but we need more if we're going to bring down the bigger players. Armitage, Matthews, they're the key." Jack frowned. "And how do we get to them?" Cain's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't, we make them come to us." The team devised a plan to lure Tatum's allies into the open. Using the whistleblower's documents, they created a fake trail of financial discrepancies that would force Armitage and Matthews to act. The goal was to catch them red-handed as they scrambled to cover their tracks. The operation was risky, requiring precise timing and airtight coordination. Cain's agents set up surveillance, while Jack and Lisa worked undercover to plant the forged evidence in key locations. Emily, meanwhile, struggled with her role. She wanted to be in the field, but Cain insisted she stay behind for her safety. "You're too important," he said. "Without you, this whole case falls apart." Reluctantly, Emily agreed, but as she waited in the safe house, her anxiety grew. Every second felt like an eternity, and the weight of the trial ahead loomed over her like a storm cloud. The trap was sprung during a high-profile gala attended by Armitage, Matthews, and several other key figures in Tatum's network. Cain's team moved in swiftly, seizing incriminating documents and detaining multiple suspects. News of the operation dominated headlines, overshadowing Tatum's media campaign. For the first time, public opinion began to shift. and Emily felt a glimmer of hope. But the victory came at a cost. Victor, who had played a pivotal role in the sting, was ambushed the following night. He survived, but his injuries left him hospitalized and vulnerable. As Jack visited him in the hospital, Victor's words sent a chill down his spine. "Tatum knows what you're doing," Victor said, his voice weak but defiant. "And he's coming for you." Amid the chaos, Emily received an unexpected visit from Tatum's estranged daughter, Isabel, a young lawyer with a complicated relationship with her father. Isabel offered insight into Tatum's psyche and his weaknesses. "He wasn't always like this," Isabel said, her voice tinged with regret. "There was a time when he cared about more than money and power. But something changed. He started seeing everyone as a threat." Emily hesitated. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know he won't stop until you're gone," Isabel replied. "But if you can outsmart him, you might have a chance." The meeting left Emily conflicted. Isabel's words were both a warning and an opportunity. And Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the young woman knew more than she was letting on. With public support growing and Tatum's allies turning against him, the case was gaining momentum. But as Kane prepared for the trial of the century, Tatum launched his most desperate attack yet. Hackers targeted the FBI's servers, wiping critical evidence and leaving the prosecution scrambling to recover. Emily and Benny narrowly escaped an attempted kidnapping, and Lisa discovered a mole within Kane's team. The stakes had never been higher. But neither Jack nor Emily was willing to back down. "We've come too far to stop now," Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "This isn't just about us anymore." Jack nodded, his jaw set. "Then let's finish this." The courthouse buzzed with tension as the trial of Owen Tatum officially began. Journalists swarmed the steps, cameras flashing as key players entered. Emily and Benny, under heavy guard, slipped into a private entrance, their faces pale but determined. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Thorne, faced off against Tatum's legal powerhouse, Richard Whitman. Judge Eleanor Harris, known for her no-nonsense approach, presided with an iron gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Thorne began in her opening statement, "today, we shine a light on a criminal empire built on corruption, greed, and the exploitation of countless lives. Owen Tatum believed he was untouchable, but the evidence will show that no one is above the law." Whitman countered with a performance worthy of the theater. "My client is a respected businessman," he declared, his voice smooth as silk. "These allegations are not only baseless but part of a vendetta orchestrated by unreliable witnesses with questionable motives." The battle lines were drawn. Emily took the stand on the second day of the trial. As she recounted her time working for Tatum, the courtroom hung on her every word. She described the hidden transactions, the coded messages, and the fear that had driven her to flee. Thorne guided her through the testimony, her questions sharp but empathetic. "Ms. Walker, why did you risk everything to bring this evidence forward?" Emily's voice trembled but didn't falter. "Because I couldn't live with myself knowing what he was doing. People were being hurt, lives destroyed, and I was part of it. I had to do something." Whitman's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned her credibility, her motives, and even her pregnancy, insinuating she was using her condition to garner sympathy. "You claim you were afraid for your life," Whitman sneered, "yet you waited months before coming forward. Why?" Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Because I knew what he was capable of. And I knew he'd come after me. But I couldn't stay silent forever." The jury seemed moved by her courage. But the seeds of doubt Whitman planted lingered. Benny's testimony was more chaotic. The former enforcer was visibly nervous, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting Tatum's men to burst through the doors at any moment. Thorne pressed him for details about the smuggling operations. But Benny's answers were fragmented, his fear palpable. "Look, all I know is what I saw," he stammered. "Tatum called the shots. We just did what we were told." Whitman pounced on Benny's hesitations, painting him as a desperate man trying to save his own skin. "Mr. Garcia, how much were you paid for this testimony?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Benny bristled. "I wasn't paid. I'm here because you had no choice." Whitman interrupted. "Isn't that right?" The tension in the room was suffocating as Benny struggled to defend himself. While his testimony provided valuable insight, his credibility was left battered. The courtroom was stunned when Victor, still recovering from his injuries, appeared to testify. His presence alone was a dramatic twist. And his words carried weight. Tatum doesn't care about anyone but himself, Victor said, his voice steady. I was loyal to him for years. And he left me to die. That's who he is. Victor provided chilling details about Tatum's operations, corroborating Emily and Benny's accounts. His testimony was a turning point, giving the prosecution the edge they desperately needed. But it came at a cost. As Victor left the courthouse, escorted by federal agents, a car bomb detonated nearby. The attack missed its mark. But the message was clear. Tatum's reach extended far beyond the courtroom. Midway through the trial, the prosecution introduced new evidence, an encrypted file recovered from Tatum's servers. The file contained a list of names, high-ranking officials, judges, and business executives implicated in the conspiracy. The courtroom erupted in chaos as the implications sank in. Whitman objected vehemently, claiming the evidence was inadmissible due to chain of custody issues. Judge Harris called for an emergency recess to review the matter. During the break, Kane confronted Jack and Emily. This is the break we needed. But it's also a double-edged sword. He said, if we can't authenticate this file, Tatum's team will rip us apart. Emily's resolve hardened. Then we have to find a way to prove it. The trial reached its climax when a surprise witness took the stand, Isabel, Tatum's estranged daughter. Her testimony provided a deeply personal perspective on her father's crimes. I tried to warn him, Isabel said, her voice trembling, but he wouldn't listen. He told me loyalty was everything, and that anyone who betrayed him would pay the price. Her testimony was a bombshell, exposing not only Tatum's ruthlessness but also his vulnerability. Whitman's cross-examination faltered as Isabel stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. The jury's expressions revealed the impact of her words. For the first time, it seemed Tatum's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments were delivered. Thorne's impassioned plea painted Tatum as the orchestrator of a vast criminal empire, while Whitman insisted the prosecution had failed to meet the burden of proof. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Each hour felt like an eternity for Emily and Jack, who waited anxiously in the courthouse. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of cheers and shouts. Tatum sat motionless, his expression unreadable, as the judge announced his sentence, life in prison without parole. With Tatum behind bars, the aftermath of the trial brought a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The case had exposed systemic corruption, leading to widespread reforms and the resignation of several high-profile figures. Emily and Jack, no longer living in fear, decided to start fresh. They used their experiences to inspire others, opening a community center in Brooklyn that offered legal aid and vocational training to underserved populations. I want to help people who feel like they don't have a voice, Emily said during the center's opening ceremony. Because I know what it's like to feel powerless. Jack, standing beside her, couldn't hide his pride. And now we're showing them they don't have to be. The story of Owen Tatum's downfall became a symbol of justice and resilience. Jack and Emily's courage, combined with the efforts of Kane, Lisa, and others, had dismantled a criminal empire and brought hope to a city desperate for change. As Jack and Emily stood on the steps of their community center, watching families and volunteers work together, they knew they had found their purpose. Do you think we made a difference? Emily asked. Jack smiled, wrapping an arm around her. I think we've only just begun. The fallout from Owen Tatum's conviction rippled through the city like a tidal wave. Headlines chronicled the collapse of his criminal empire, and public outcry demanded accountability from those complicit in his schemes. The once feared kingpin was now a cautionary tale, his influence shattered. For Emily, the victory was bittersweet. Though Tatum was behind bars, the scars of her ordeal lingered. She found herself replaying the courtroom moments in her mind, haunted by Whitman's ruthless cross-examination and the constant threat that had hung over her. Jack noticed her struggle. You've been through hell, he said one evening as they sat on the porch of their new apartment in Brooklyn. But you didn't just survive, you won. And you've given people hope. Emily managed a small smile. It doesn't feel like enough. There's still so much work to do. Jack nodded. Then let's do it together. The trial's outcome sparked a wave of reforms. Federal investigations uncovered corruption in law enforcement, politics, and business, leading to arrests and resignations. Senator Armitage and Judge Matthews, exposed during the trial, became symbols of a system overdue for change. The FBI launched a task force dedicated to dismantling remnants of Tatum's network. Agent Kane, now a celebrated figure, continued his work with renewed determination. Tatum was just the start. He told reporters, "We're going after every last one of them." Lisa Ramirez, emboldened by her role in the case, took a promotion and became a prominent advocate for police accountability. She remained close to Jack and Emily, often dropping by their community center to lend a hand. Jack and Emily's community center quickly became a beacon of hope. Located in the heart of Brooklyn, it offered free legal aid, vocational training, and support for families affected by crime and corruption. The garage-turned-workshop in the back became a popular spot for young mechanics learning the trade under Jack's guidance. Emily's legal background proved invaluable as she helped clients navigate bureaucratic red tape and fight for their rights. Each success story, an immigrant family securing housing, a single mother getting fair wages, a wrongly accused teenager clearing their name, reaffirmed her purpose. During a fundraiser, Isabel, Tatum's estranged daughter, made a surprise appearance. "What you're doing here, it's incredible," she told Emily. "My father destroyed lives. You're helping rebuild them." Emily squeezed Isabel's hand. "You helped make this possible. Your testimony made a difference." Though Tatum's empire had crumbled, remnants of his network still posed a danger. Jack received an anonymous tip one night warning of a possible retaliation plot targeting Emily. Lisa quickly mobilized her connections, ensuring the FBI assigned a security detail to the couple. "They're desperate," she explained. "Tatum's men know they're losing ground, and they're lashing out." Emily refused to let fear dictate her actions. "We didn't come this far just to live in hiding," she said. "If they come for us, we'll face them." Jack supported her resolve, though he quietly took measures to reinforce their security, from upgrading the locks at the center to keeping a bat within reach at home. As months passed, Victor, recovering from his injuries, reached out to Jack. The former enforcer had entered the witness protection program but struggled with guilt over his role in Tatum's crimes. "I want to make amends," Victor said during the clandestine meeting. "If there's anything I can do." Jack studied him for a moment. "There's always a way to make things right. Start by helping the people Tatum hurt." Victor began working with the community center remotely, sharing insights into how criminal networks operated. His contributions helped vulnerable individuals avoid falling prey to similar schemes. The center's success caught the attention of the media, and soon Jack and Emily found themselves as reluctant public figures. Interviews and articles highlighted their journey from fear to resilience, inspiring others to take action in their own communities. During one particularly emotional event, a young woman approached Emily. "You saved my brother," she said, tears in her eyes. "He was in trouble, and your center gave him a second chance. Thank you." Emily hugged her, overwhelmed. "This is why we do it." Despite their busy lives, Jack and Emily made time for each other. They celebrated the small victories, nights spent laughing over takeout, quiet moments watching the sunset, and planning for the arrival of their child. As Emily's due date approached, the couple prepared for a new chapter in their lives. Jack often joked about baby-proofing the garage, while Emily debated names that reflected their journey. One evening, as they sat in the nursery, Jack took Emily's hand. "We've been through so much, but this feels like a new beginning." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "It is, for all of us." On a crisp autumn morning, Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Grace, a nod to the strength and resilience that had carried them through their darkest days. Friends and supporters gathered at the hospital to celebrate. Lisa brought a tiny pair of boxing gloves as a gift, while Kane joked about recruiting Grace for the FBI someday. As Jack cradled his daughter for the first time, he felt a profound sense of purpose. "She's going to grow up in a better world," he said softly, "and we're going to make sure of it." Years later, the community center had expanded, offering new programs and reaching more people than ever. Jack and Emily continued their work, now joined by Grace, who had grown into a compassionate and curious child. On the anniversary of Tatum's conviction, the family attended a ceremony honoring those who had fought for justice. Standing together, surrounded by a thriving community. Jack and Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "We started this because we had no choice," Jack said, "but now, it's our choice to keep going." Emily nodded, her eyes shining, "And it always will be." Even as Owen Tatum's empire lay in ruins, the void he left behind became a battleground. Smaller crime syndicates emerged, vying for control of his former territories. The city, though freer of systemic corruption, faced new threats. Jack and Emily found themselves thrust into the role of community leaders, with their center becoming a hub of advocacy and resistance against these emerging dangers. "We may have taken down Tatum," Emily said during a meeting with local activists, "but our work isn't done. We have to protect what we've built." Agent Marcus Kane, now heading the FBI's Organized Crime Division, enlisted Jack's help in identifying the remnants of Tatum's network. Jack's street knowledge and connections made him an invaluable ally. "You got away with people," Kane admitted. "They trust you in a way they'll never trust us." Jack hesitated but agreed. "I'll help, but only if it protects this community." As the center expanded, so did the people it touched. Among them was Malik, a young man who had narrowly escaped recruitment into a rising gang. Malik's story mirrored Jack's own younger days, and Jack took him under his wing, teaching him the skills of auto repair and self-reliance. Malik became a symbol of the center's mission, drawing more youth away from the streets. "You saved me, man," Malik told Jack one evening in the garage. "Now I want to pay it forward." Meanwhile, Emily focused on advocating for systemic reform. She worked closely with lawmakers, pushing for policies that addressed the root causes of crime, poverty, lack of education, and institutional neglect. Her legal expertise and first-hand experience gave her arguments undeniable weight. Despite their successes, the couple faced backlash from those who saw their efforts as disruptive. Local politicians tied to old loyalties attempted to undermine the center's influence. Anonymous threats resurfaced, reminding them that Tatum's ghost still lingered. One night, Jack received a chilling call. A distorted voice warned, "You think you've won, but this isn't over." The call traced back to a known associate of Victor, who had disappeared from witness protection. Fearing the worst, Jack reached out to Lisa Ramirez, now a lieutenant in the NYPD. "This isn't just a threat," Lisa said after investigating. "Someone's mobilizing. We think it's one of Tatum's lieutenants trying to rebuild." Emily refused to be intimidated. "We faced Tatum head-on," she said. "We can face this, too." The revelation prompted Jack, Emily, and their allies to double down on their efforts. They worked with Kane's team to track the resurgence of Tatum's network, focusing on dismantling its financial and logistical support. Isabel, Tatum's daughter, returned unexpectedly, this time offering actionable intelligence. She had discovered hidden ledgers detailing the remnants of her father's empire. "I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent," she told Emily. "He was my father, but he was a monster. I want to help make things right." The ledgers revealed plans to re-establish smuggling routes and re-engage corrupt officials. It was a chilling reminder that the battle wasn't over. But it also gave Kane's team the upper hand. "Your father left a trail of destruction," Emily said, "but what you're doing now, it matters." Isabel's decision to testify publicly against her father's associate solidified her place as a crucial ally. Though it painted a target on her back, the climax came when a high-profile sting operation targeted a warehouse believed to be the headquarters of the new syndicate. Jack, against Emily's wishes, volunteered to assist Kane and his team. "This isn't just your fight anymore," Emily argued. "You have a family to think about." Jack kissed her forehead. "And I'm doing this for them. For us." The raid was tense and dangerous, with Kane's agents facing heavily armed adversaries. Jack used his knowledge of the warehouse's layout to guide the team, ensuring minimal casualties. The operation ended with the capture of several key figures and the recovery of crucial evidence. But the leader escaped, leaving behind a message scrawled on the wall: "The fight isn't over." Amid the chaos, Grace's first birthday was a moment of light. Surrounded by friends, family, and members of the community, Jack and Emily celebrated their daughter's milestone with laughter and hope. As Jack watched Grace toddle around the room, he felt a deep sense of purpose. "Everything we do," he said to Emily, "is for her future." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "And for everyone like her. She'll grow up in a better world because we won't stop fighting for it." The center continued to grow, offering new programs and expanding its reach. It became a symbol of resilience and unity, drawing national attention as a model for community-driven reform. Jack and Emily, though reluctant to be in the spotlight, used their platform to advocate for justice and equality. Their story inspired others to stand up against corruption and fight for their communities. During a televised interview, Jack summed up their mission. "We're proof that even in the darkest times, people can come together to make a difference. And that's something worth fighting for." Years later, Jack and Emily stood before a mural painted on the side of their center. It depicted scenes from their journey, Emily in the courtroom, Jack behind the wheel of his taxi, and their community rising together. Grace, now a curious and confident teenager, joined them. "Did all of this really happen?" she asked. Gazing at the mural, Jack smiled. "It did, and it's still happening." Emily placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Because justice isn't something you achieve once. It's something you keep working for." As the sun set over Brooklyn, the family stood together, a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and hope.